All right, now you're going to get a taste of the what I've been doing for the last 9 months, 12 months, which is talking to journalists about AI. So I'd like to get up now for this panel, Lisa Gibbs from AEP. Lisa, thank you. Mukul Devichand, who's from the BBC. And where's Claudia? Claudia, come on. And Claudia from Bloomberg. So I'm going to have a very, please. I'm just going to ask them a quick question, but time is pressing, so I think it's more about you getting a chance. And I've got some fantastic people in the room, and you might want to ask some questions as well. But I'm just going to kick off. We've been hearing me sort of talking on in general terms. We've had a couple of brilliant case studies about what people are actually doing. But if you could just tell me what's the thing that most excites you about what you're doing now. We can leave the negative stuff till later, but what excites you most about the stuff you're doing now, thinking ahead? Lisa.
There are many things, of course. I think, first of all, remember, we're a news agency that's delivering news to other media outlets, not the end consumer. So just that's the context in which I'm answering these questions. So one is something that's already been hinted at, which is the power of using these technologies to help journalists essentially cover their beats better. How do we identify news and break news faster? But I think more significantly, how do we use these technologies to surface voices that often go unheard, to find new ideas, to find new voices that can really inform our journalism and end this concern we have about fake news by omission. We can surface that more quickly. The other thing, and I'll just say this real quickly, there's a lot of discussion, as there should be, about the use of algorithms to personalize the delivery of content. Along with all the risks of filter bubbles, et cetera, that go with that. But I think one of the things that we are really excited about is the potential for these technologies to help create forms of content for different platforms that are more personal to the way you want to consume news. So you might want a short story, a long story. You might prefer to get your news in bullet point form. Maybe you want a Q&A. We certainly don't want our journalists sitting there spending time writing multiple versions of the same story. That's not what we want them doing. But if we can leverage technology to help produce those multiple versions, we can actually serve the audiences better and more efficiently.
A lot of what you do is, in a sense, I don't know if the right word is commodity journalism, but what kind of proportion do you think that is now of the way that you're using AI? How much have you been able to shift that towards doing other things?
It's a hard question to answer because our portfolio, there are certain areas where we're automatically creating text stories from data, particularly around business and sports news. But then there are other ways, like, say, automated transcription of video, or, as you know, we're creating a tool that uses computer vision to read our video and generate shot lists by identifying when a person starts speaking, when a person stops speaking. So in other words, these are production efficiencies where we can then say to video editors, hey, you can work on more, interesting journalism. And I think, so the types of efficiencies we're achieving are so different that I think it's hard to quantify, but now you've got me thinking that I should do that.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. You need to get your metrics right. Mukul, I've known you for so long, and your job title keeps changing, and you've now got this amazing. Who would have thought, even 5 years ago, there'd be a BBC editor of voice and AI? You've had a few kind of ambivalences about how you do this, but where do you see the way forward?
Ambivalences, you say?
Well,
like uncertainties.
Uncertainties, yeah.
No, so my job, you're right, it is an interesting job title. I think I now understand it. So it's essentially, I'm in charge of how the BBC creates experiences in the world of AI assistants, which are often accessed by your voice, things like Alexa or the Google Assistant and so forth. So in terms of what I'm excited about, so I'm very excited about something we just launched. I'm also excited about something that we have on the horizon. The thing we just launched is an interactive news experience on the Alexa assistant at the moment. I'm planning to launch it more widely. So you say, Alexa, give me BBC News. I'm sorry if I've triggered anyone's device. You're fine. And you get something that you can begin to have a conversation with. Quite a basic conversation right now. You can move through stories. You can ask for more on stories that you particularly care about, and we can use that as an opportunity to give you some explanatory journalism or something, a bit longer. The thing that I'm really excited about within the next 12 months is beginning to bring into the world our own conversational assistant, which we are provisionally calling Beeb.
What?
Beeb.
Beeb.
Beeb. Hello, Beeb.
Right.
I don't know if you can get the reference there, Beeb. So I mean, and what I'd say about that is, that will be a mechanism for us to offer a conversational relationship with, what we would say is a pan kind of proposition portfolio. So news, but also all the other content the BBC is known for, and a kind of a public service assistant, in the sense that we're a public service broadcaster, and really thinking about those values as you navigate all of that content. And I'd say what the two things have in common is the idea of being able to offer to people, and I think it goes back to the slide you put up about some of the concerns actually about the AI future. Being able to offer to people a conversational relationship with this public broadcaster set up with a public service mission that they trust and that they can trust. And so we think to serve that mission best, we need to be able to control what will become an increasingly conversational possibility of talking to machines with those public service values. And so both of those are experiences that have that at their heart.
Okay. Claudia, thanks for coming. You also you almost got the editor of algorithms title that I mentioned earlier. You're head of news automation at Bloomberg.
Yes.
Obviously you do this incredible work around financial reporting and so on. But what excites you about that? Is it what goes beyond that apart from just stocks and shares and results?
There's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So, well, first, for context, Bloomberg is financial news. So it's a very specific slice of news that we do day in and day out. And another characteristic is that we have a lot of data. So it's perfect for applying all kinds of technology within the AI umbrella, but also like other technologies as well for automation. It doesn't need to be AI only, and we kind of apply all of it. I think for next year and for the next 12 months, what excites us the most is the possibility of integrating all of those projects that we've been holding together. So from monitoring, from teaching bots how to write, from using machine learning and ML to try to spot things that we might have lost or missed out. The unknown, as financial market participants always want to know. So we want to integrate all of those into the workflow of the journalist. So basically come up with a system and a workflow where we augment the journalism practice, the day-to-day, making it easier for them to scale up, how we incorporate all kinds of content, how do we crunch the data, how do we process all of this data to be able to go beyond stocks. And to be honest, like I'm always trying to do less with equity and more with credit, just because everyone does equity, and there's a much more incredibly harder problem to tackle when you go through fixed income markets and other markets.
Yeah, and without being sort of negative, obviously we've got you three on stage because you're all fabulously successful and your organisations are leaping into the pool of AI with great alacrity, and you're not drowning yet. But how would you identify the sort of challenges to this? And what's your biggest problem? Is it internal in terms of, cultural resistance, coordination, or is it even the user?
I think we have a little bit of all of the problems in sort of proportion that you mentioned. clearly culture tends to be, people are afraid. Sometimes they're said, oh, am I going to lose my job in here and that?
Yeah.
The moment you show them, you deploy a little bit of tech and then it makes their life easier, they completely change their minds and they start lobbying for more. Can you also give me this? Can you also give me that?
Okay.
And so it changes very fast. So normally it's about not knowing. So the lack of knowledge and understanding of what the technologies are and what they can do for you definitely have an impact over how fast you're willing to incorporate technologies. I think another big challenge that we don't really talk about much is cleaning data. Because cleaning data, I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah.
If anyone here has worked with it, it's just extremely hard. And I think in the cleaning data also comes another challenge, which we have to discuss more and more. Normally comes up as part of the ethics, but it also means domain knowledge expertise, because you cannot clean data if you don't know what the data is about or what it should be looking for the data. What is the angle of the data that is relevant or that we all should care?
Yeah.
So I think those are big challenges. And another one that I would mention is which you touched on the survey, which is finding the right technology for the right problem.
Right.
Because I think also sometimes you hear people say, I'm just going to throw AI on all of that, and it doesn't even work for that problem. So identify the problem, find out if that problem is actually something that you can use AI to solve with, because sometimes you don't even have to go there, and you can use other technologies to automate and do other processes that are very useful. So I think it's a combination of all of it.
Okay.
A lot of it, I mean, goes down to education and understanding of the technologies.
Yeah. Mukul, especially the fact that you are the BBC and your public service, that must bring in extra considerations around the idea of your, dare we call it a brand, when you're distributed on these other platforms in a way that you can't entirely control?
Mm-hmm. I think certainly. And I think, so, as per the kind of wider journalism and AI scene, as you said before, there's stuff to do with, reporting, production, and there's stuff to do with distribution. So this is, what we're looking at here is just the distribution side of that. And there, I think, AI assistants represent some of the same. I mean, if you think of the great kind of disruptions to the distribution of ideas, actually in society or journalism, or whatever, that we've had several in the last, we've talked about them a lot, Charlie. But there's the web, there's the mobile, and then there's the social web. And I think the challenges around distribution in the social web era are actually a really good pointer and lesson for what's coming in the AI assistant era. So what are those challenges? I mean, they are to do with, as you suggested, the disaggregation or the intermediation of brands. And I think from a brand point of view, that's something to think about. But actually, there's stuff about the brand, there's stuff about which wouldn't apply so much to the BBC in the UK, but there's stuff about the commercial model. And there's also stuff about actually the editorial principles, right? There's like information kind of flows around the world through algorithms. You don't really have any control of where it goes. You don't really know what juxtapositions happen with it. And I think, I used to do a lot of stuff on social platforms, and obviously the content type changes and the videos get shorter and shorter. And actually, where does the editorial in producing each unit, each video end?
And do you think that's a big difference? BBC on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram to this more distributed voice thing? You think that's no, especially because the algorithms are much more deterministic.
Yeah, so I think they're really similar, but it's an intensification of a similar process. Right. So, videos are themselves a unit, but then the relationship between them and the journeys between them are as much a part of the experience, and so in some ways they're as much a part of the editorial. Yeah. And I think that becomes even more intense in the potential era. We're not there yet of AI assistants, where it's not just about long pieces of content like a podcast or a video, but snippets of information being reassembled by the assistant. Yeah. And so so it's like the same problem but more intensified. And I think that's we're trying to learn some of the lessons about what happened in the social media era and bring that into how we operate in the AI era, while being totally excited about it, because it brings all sorts of brilliant possibilities for audiences. But I think we have to get this right as a public broadcaster, and also as a journalistic profession, I suppose. Yeah.
Sorry if this is boring, but I'm really enjoying this, and it's what I've been doing for the last 9 months is talking to people about this. One last question, Lisa, but then I'm going to go out to you guys if you've got any, because you've got questions to ask these people. One last question to you, Lisa, on the ethical bit. Obviously, AP style guide book is one of the little sort of, coders for journalism more generally, not just for your organisation. How do you think we need something around this area? Do you think we need something? I
mean, we've definitely been talking, including with you, about the AP style book chapter on the use of automation and AI to help, set those standards. And I think, as you were indicating earlier, it goes beyond kind of creating the ethical framework for these technologies, but also I think an important part of this is the sharing of best practices. I mean, one of the things that we've been working on and concerned about is the innovation gap among media, and particularly we all know, local news all over the world is struggling, and how do we make sure that those local news organizations or those smaller news organizations that really, if anybody needs to become more efficient or reach their audiences more effectively, it's them, and the barriers to helping them use those technologies is huge, and a lot of that is because they don't understand where it can help them. And so I think that whether it's the AP style book or other training efforts like yours, we can really do a lot to help eliminate that innovation gap.
Excellent. Thanks very much, guys. I'd like to throw it out to you now, if we can get some questions. Where am I? Fantastic, thank you. One question right at the back there, that's always fair, and then we've got one question here. Thank you, Victoria. Start with at the back there, thank you.
Thanks for an excellent panel. I had a question for Mukul, and I'm head of news development at the Swedish radio, Ole Zachrisson. And so now you're inventing a new software. But you know that you also have to have hardware to access the software. So when is BBC developing a hardware to install the voice assistant into?
Thanks for the question, Ola. We're not.
We're not. Yeah.
It's quite a simple answer. Yeah. This technology is not actually inside those smart speakers you buy. Every single one of us has a voice assistant probably in our phones. AI assistants are becoming distributed in all sorts of ways, and we're looking for partnership and integration across the piece and in our apps and things like that. So the answer is don't hold your breath for that.
Yeah. And more broadly, sorry, this is sort of general, not just at you, Mukul, but you're having to deal with the world as it is. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely right. I think we are trying our best to ensure the best experience for the British public, for our audiences around the world in this new technology, trying to preserve those things like trust and editorial integrity. This isn't about, it's not grander than that, right? And that's grand enough.
That's grand enough, yeah, welcome, please.
Hi.
Sorry to interrupt, do you mind just saying who you are and then that'd be lovely.
I'm Jay Owens, I'm a media researcher, and I'm particularly interested in how machine learning can help us find things we didn't know we were looking for. I think this is really important to make AI not just a tool of like pattern recognition and kind of cultural imperialism and like the imposure of the same standards across everything, but how can it make us find new voices and new stories? And Jane, you mentioned this as something maybe Reuters were doing a bit of.
I'm AP, not Jane is not here for
sorry,
me.
Jane,
sorry.
Sorry, I should have. That's not your fault. I should have said at the very beginning. Jane has got an appalling cold, so she can't be with us.
But we're great
wonderfully
friends.
that Lisa.
Okay.
Yeah, great friends. Yeah,
Please forgive.
Despite competing like mad.
that's right.
No, so a couple of things we'll talk about, and believe me, I could talk for an hour about this, so I'm going to try not to. But I'll say a couple of things. I mean, first of all, there's an explosion of companies that are working on creating event detection systems or news detection systems, creating algorithms to kind of scan the crazy world of social media to identify when people are posting about news. So think that that's probably easy when it comes to things like the fire, the shooting, the storm, but now, take that idea of that technology and apply it to things like, can we tap into conversations that people are having around immigration or elections? We did some work with a startup out of the MIT Media Lab that was transcribing every hour of US talk radio and tagging it. The audience for US talk radio is incredibly different than the audience that's on Twitter. And so the idea was, can we, by merging both of those content sources, can we find some unique things that are being said about various topics? So, I mean, these are just very generally ideas that are that give me some hope that we can get to the point where we'll have some tools to help us do that more effectively.
Please, Claudia.
Comments. So we've worked very, very hard on that problem. Like, how do you find the unknown? How do you monitor through the growing amount of stories that happen everywhere, both in news from everywhere in the globe, plus every language, in every part that could be financially relevant or some sort of economic impact. We're trying to apply every technology that we want. We've created an internal monitor that applies machine learning, and then the journalist can go into that monitor, plug in for certain things that it wants to look for, and then the stream will be kind of distilled into what could be potentially the breaking news item, and how do you basically narrow down for relevant items that you want the human to take a look at. So I think those are kind of fascinating, because you see in working and how fast you can just go through a lot of content to be able to find the one thing that might be relevant.
Yeah. It's the sort of superpower journalist going.
Chuck in a quick thought, and this is a plug for the jobs that were mentioned earlier. So if anyone is a data scientist, so not in the same realm, which is looking for stories and making sure you find everything that you need to find, but in the realm of moving around, finding content and so forth. One of our directors at BBC, James Pennell, has spoken about the public service algorithm, which is a grand way of saying, we are looking for ways to not do some of the things that we worry about. So, trying to broaden people's horizons, not encourage filter bubbles and so forth. And that's one of the data science challenges that we have. So come and help us solve it.
Okay. At the back there. At the back.
Nick Newman from the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. I'm really interested in this challenge about transparency. So how do you communicate these incredibly complex issues to journalists when content and algorithms are kind of mixed up increasingly going forward? I mean, I'm interested in the panel's view about how we should approach that challenge.
Do you mean to journalists?
No, I don't mean internally. I mean to audiences.
Audiences.
Right? So
audiences.
if we're communicating stuff that is a mixture of content and algorithms, how they see recommendations.
Yeah.
Answer that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
So ours, we actually give the bot a byline. So every story that has like some sort of automation in it, either fully automated or semi-automated, it will be there by Bloomberg Automation or with the system of Bloomberg Automation. So it's very clear that a bot has been involved in that story.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really smart, and I think some of the answer to that problem, not all of it, can be found in actually quite traditional editorial values. The BBC, we talk a lot about safeguarding trust, right? We know even now it's possible to, using a green screen, put a presenter anywhere, but of course we never do that, or if we do it, it's clear that we were doing it. And some of those principles can be brought over, I think. So I think it's a little bit about casting that editorial eye over what the customer is getting or the audience is getting, and just making sure that you are safeguarding trust.
Well, and I would just say, I mean, we have some similar practices around disclosing the use of automation technology. I think the bigger challenge gets to when, for example, reporters are building algorithms to search through thousands of pages of documents to determine that, oh, X number of times, this occurred, or, we searched 10,000 documents about X and discovered, 200 claims around this. Well, how we explain how we created that algorithm, on what basis, the level of accuracy, which gets into how comfortable we are with less than 100% accuracy, which was referred to earlier. I mean, I think that's where it gets a little trickier because, being able to understand them within our own newsroom, can be a challenge, much less explaining those things to audiences. And there are, getting to what I was discussing earlier about the idea of an AP style book for this, there have been lots of conversations about this exact issue, the transparency around newsrooms' use of algorithms in investigative reporting. And I just think there's a lot more work to be done and experiments to be tried as to what engages audience and what doesn't.
And in the past, I mean, journalism hasn't always had a great record on transparency. People use AP copy without mentioning it, that kind of thing. Quick one here.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. I obviously have a lot of questions on AI, but
you get one and it's quick.
I was wondering, what's the percentage of AI you're using in the overall news process? What would be that percentage in breaking news, for example? And aren't you afraid of outliers? For example, when you're looking for the hidden signal in noise, this can be easily averaged, which is what AI algorithms does all the time, averages. So sometimes this signal is the most important thing, and that can be filtered out by your algorithms. So.
We're just going to scale it.
Well, I mean, first of all, the algorithms in terms of detecting have to keep getting better and better, but also, I mean, that's why that human aspect, I mean, we don't have a goal of automating the newsroom. So every alert we get about a potential news story or every claim that's surfaced to us, that's going to a journalist who then is able to use their critical judgment and reporting to evaluate the likelihood of that. I mean, look, there's a bit clearly, an arms race around, the improvement of these algorithms. But, that's why I think having an approach that's journalist first, technology second is critical.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think when it comes to important reporting, it's probably 0%, but that doesn't mean that there aren't ways to augment the tool set that journalists have, which is something slightly different.
I think it's a combination of always retraining your algo. So you do your model, but you cannot. It's not a set and forget thing. You just have, because reality keeps changing, the players keep changing. So you have to constantly go back and retrain the model. I think that is one important thing about how do you add transparency. We get a lot of questions over methodology. I think it's one thing that we as journalists should be always making a point in making sure that the methodology is disclosed. We show how we get to the numbers, which are the facts around it, where is the source, where that is coming from. And I think the more transparent you are, the more credibility you get for any of those stories. So if you're interested in getting credibility, you have to disclose the methodology.
But I think not to gloss over his point, I mean, sitting up here are three of the largest news organizations in the world that have very long, I mean, we're 170 years old. I mean, we have very established standards and principles. I mean, obviously there are actors out in the world that can use these technologies for evil, not for good. And, how does the audience know the difference? I mean, these are real issues. So not to gloss over that. But we just know what we're doing to try to prevent that.
Yeah. Listen, we've got to stop there. Thank you very much. It's been an amazing evening. In a minute, Hackers are going to have a quick chat with you. But I've really loved this last conversation. It's been typical of the fascinating conversations I've had over the last year. It's a conversation that's going to continue. We're hoping to do loads more on this. We're hoping to build a network. So please keep in touch. Tell us about other people that you think might want to be part of this kind of dialogue. And we look forward to continuing it. So thank you very much, you guys. And thank you to everyone else as well.